They mocked the Navy SEAL for living in a cave, until his K-9 stopped cold at the abandoned Soviet railcar buried in the Montana wilderness. Some truths refused to stay buried. The truck's engine coughed twice before dying completely. Garrett Thorne sat behind the wheel for a long moment, hands still gripping the cracked leather, staring through the windshield at nothing in particular. The Montana sky stretched wide and empty above him, the kind of sky that made a man feel small, insignificant, forgettable. That was exactly what he wanted. Behind him in the back seat, Stryker shifted his weight. The German Shepherd's tactical harness creaked softly, the sound familiar, comforting. 7 years they'd worked together. 7 years of heat and sand and chaos. 7 years of trusting each other when trusting anyone else would have gotten them killed. Garrett opened the door. The cold hit him immediately, sharp and clean. Nothing like the suffocating heat he still felt sometimes in his sleep. He stepped down onto the gravel, boots crunching, and Stryker followed, landing with the economical grace of a working dog who'd never been a pet, would never be a pet. The town of Coldwater Ridge sat in the valley below a collection of wood and brick buildings that looked like they'd been dropped there by accident and decided to stay out of stubbornness. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin gray lines. Somewhere a dog barked. Not Stryker. Stryker didn't waste energy on barking. Garrett pulled his olive field jacket tighter. The elbows were worn through to the lining, but he'd had it since his second deployment. Some things you didn't replace just because they got old. "Come on, boy," he said quietly. They walked down the slope toward the main street. It wasn't much of a street. A general store, a diner, a post office that doubled as the town hall, and a gas station that looked like it had been built in the 70s and given up trying sometime in the 90s. 3 men stood outside the diner, coffee cups steaming in their hands. They noticed Garrett immediately. Small towns always did. Strangers were events here, things to be examined, discussed, filed away. The tallest one, a man with a face like weathered stone, nudged his companion. They watched Garrett approach, watched Stryker move at his left side, not heeling like a pet, but flanking like a soldier. Garrett kept his eyes forward, heading for the general store. The sign above the door said Brennan's in faded red letters. "That's him," one of the men said, not bothering to lower his voice. "The one who bought the Widow's Peak land." "Living in a cave," another added. $40,000 for 40 acres of rock and a hole in the ground. Laughter. Not cruel exactly, but dismissive. The kind of laughter that said they'd already decided who Garrett was, what he was worth, why he didn't matter. Stryker's ears rotated toward the sound. His pace didn't change. The general store smelled like coffee and sawdust and something sweet Garrett couldn't identify. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 60s, gray hair pulled back, eyes sharp and assessing, but not unkind. "Help you?" she asked. "Need supplies," Garrett said. "Rope, tarp, lantern, fuel, matches." She nodded, already moving. "You're the one bought the Harlow property?" "Yes, ma'am." "Margaret Brennan. People call me Maggie." She set a coil of rope on the counter. "You planning to actually live up there, in the cave?" "That's right." She studied him for a moment, the way people who'd lived long lives studied things, looking past the surface. "Folks talk. You know that." "I know." "They think you're running from something." Garrett met her eyes. "Maybe I am." Maggie's expression softened slightly. She glanced down at Stryker, who sat perfectly still, perfectly alert, watching everything and nothing. "Military dog. Retired. Like you. Like me." She gathered the rest of his supplies in silence, wrapped them in brown paper, tied the bundle with twine. When she rang him up, she added something he hadn't asked for, a package of bratwurst from the cooler. "For him," she said, nodding at Stryker. Garrett started to refuse, then stopped. Kindness was rare enough. "You didn't throw it back." "Thank you." Outside, he opened the package. Stryker sniffed once, a quick professional assessment. Then he turned his head away, looking off toward the mountains. Garrett almost smiled. Too good for grocery store sausage. Stryker's tail remained still. Behind them, the 3 men from the diner had moved closer. The tall one, Evan McClure, crossed his arms. "You really gonna live like a hermit up there?" Garrett looked at him. "Planning to." "Why?" another asked Sam, his brother. "Place has been empty 20 years. There's a reason for that." "Doesn't bother me." The third man said, Reed, their cousin. "Owen Harlow, the guy who owned it before he warned people off. Said something wasn't right up there. Said a hunter went missing in those woods back in the 60s. Garrett secured his supplies to the truck bed. "I'll manage." Evan stepped closer. Too close. Stryker shifted almost imperceptibly, placing himself between the stranger and Garrett. His posture didn't change, but something in the air did. A tightness. A warning. Evan noticed, stepped back. That dog trained to bite, he's trained to make decisions, Garrett said quietly. Good ones. The men watched him drive away, their laughter following him up the mountain road. The cave entrance looked like a wound in the hillside, a dark mouth, exhaling cold air that smelled of stone and time. Garrett parked 50 yards away, killed the engine, sat listening to the silence. This was what he'd come for. Distance. Emptiness. A place where the ghost in his head might get bored and leave him alone. Stryker jumped down immediately, beginning a perimeter check. Not random sniffing like a pet, but a methodical sweep grid pattern professional. Garrett had seen him do it 100 times in Helmand Province, in compounds and caves, and places where death waited patient and invisible. The K9 paused at the cave entrance, head tilted, ears forward. Assessing. Clear? Garrett asked. Stryker looked back at him, one deliberate blink. Then he walked inside. Garrett followed. The cave was bigger than it looked from outside, opening into a chamber roughly 20 feet across, ceiling high enough to stand in most places. The floor was dirt-packed hard, relatively flat. A natural chimney in the rock above would vent smoke. Water seeped down one wall, collecting in a natural basin. It wasn't comfort, but it was defensible. And after 6 months of sleeping in a motel where every door slam sent him reaching for a weapon that wasn't there, defensible mattered more than comfort. He spent the afternoon setting up. Tarp for the entrance weighted with stones. Sleeping bag in the back corner positioned so he could see the exit. Stryker's blanket beside his, close enough to touch. Lantern on a flat rock, matches in a waterproof container. MRRES stacked in a crate. Water purification tablets. First aid kit. The routine calmed him. Purpose without thinking. Action without decision. As sunset painted the valley orange and gold, Garrett sat at the cave entrance watching the light die. Stryker lay beside him, head on his paws, scanning the tree line with the patience of a creature who understood that vigilance wasn't paranoia, it was survival. We did good today, boy, Garrett said quietly. Stryker's tail thumped once against the ground. Agreement. Far below, the lights of Coldwater Ridge began to flicker on, small and distant. Garrett could imagine them down there, the families gathered for dinner. The comfortable rhythm of lives that made sense, that followed patterns that fit. He'd tried that, after the discharge, after the funerals, after the hearings that cleared him legally but not morally. He'd tried to fit back into the world of schedules and small talk and people who thought they understood what words like duty and sacrifice meant. He'd failed, so he'd come here, to a cave, to silence, to the company of a dog who'd seen the same things he had and didn't need him to explain. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Winter was coming, the kind of winter that killed careless men. Garrett had survived worse. He stood stretched, whistled softly. Stryker rose immediately, followed him inside. Garrett lit the lantern, the warm glow pushing back the darkness just enough. That night, as he lay in his sleeping bag, Stryker curled against his side, Garrett closed his eyes and waited for sleep. Waited for the dreams he knew would come. The sand, the heat, the radio crackling. The decision he'd made, the people who'd died because of it. Captain Nathaniel Cross. Lieutenant James Mercer. Specialist Sarah Kimball. Their names a rosary he couldn't stop saying. But tonight, something different happened. Tonight, in the space between waking and sleeping, he felt something else. A stillness. A quiet that wasn't empty, but full. Full of stone and cold and the steady breathing of a dog who trusted him. Maybe, he thought. Maybe here. Then sleep took him under. Morning came gray and cold. Garrett woke to Stryker's low growl, a sound that meant alert, not alarm. He sat up slowly, reaching for the hunting knife he kept by his bed. What is it? Stryker's eyes were fixed on the cave entrance. Ears forward, body coiled. Garrett pulled on his boots. His jacket moved to the entrance. The valley below was wrapped in mist, but through it he could see a figure climbing the trail toward the cave. A man, mid-40s, broad-shouldered, moving with the easy confidence of someone who knew these mountains. He stopped 20 yards from the cave, hands visible, empty. Garrett Thorne, he called. Who's asking? Owen Harlow. This used to be my land. Garrett stepped into the open, Stryker at his side. Up close, Owen had the weathered look of a man who worked outdoors, deep lines around his eyes, hands scarred and calloused, but his eyes were intelligent, measuring. Heard you moved in, Owen said. Wanted to meet you. Tell you something. I'm listening. Owen glanced at the cave, then back at Garrett. 10 years ago, maybe more, a man named Russell Tate went into these woods. Good hunter. Knew this ridge better than anyone. Went in one morning. Never came back out. People get lost. Not Tate, and that's not all. Owen paused. My grandfather worked in these mountains. 1960s, uranium mining, him and 13 other men. One day the whole crew vanished. Company said they quit, moved on. But my grandmother never believed it, said my grandfather wouldn't leave without telling her. Garrett felt something shift in his chest. Why are you telling me this? Because whatever's in these woods, it's still here. And you should know that. Owen met his eyes. I sold this land because I couldn't keep people away from it, couldn't protect them from their own curiosity. But you buying it, living here, maybe you got your reasons. I just wanted you to know what you're walking into. Appreciated. Owen nodded, started to turn, then stopped. One more thing. If you find anything that doesn't make sense, don't ignore it. My grandfather deserves better than being forgotten. He walked back down the trail, disappearing into the mist. Stryker watched him go, then looked up at Garrett, patient, waiting. Let's take a walk, boy. They moved into the forest, Garrett letting Stryker lead. The dog had instincts he'd learned to trust, instincts that had saved both their lives more times than he could count. The woods were old growth, thick with pine and spruce, the ground carpeted in needles that muffled their footsteps. No birds sang, no squirrels chattered, just silence, deep and absolute. 200 yards from the cave, Stryker stopped, completely stopped. Garrett had seen this before. In Afghanistan, outside a compound in Sangin. Stryker had frozen exactly like this, refused to move forward. 30 seconds later, an IED detonated where they would have been walking. What do you smell? Stryker's nose worked the air. His ears rotated, catching sounds Garrett couldn't hear. Then the dog did something he'd never done before. He sat down, not at attention, not waiting for a command, just sat looking into the trees ahead and refused to move. Stryker forward. Nothing. Garrett knelt beside him, placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. What is it, boy? Stryker turned his head, looked directly into Garrett's eyes. The intelligence there, the certainty was unmistakable. No, Garrett trusted that. He moved forward alone slowly, hand on his knife, pushed through a stand of young pines, and stopped. In a small clearing, half buried in earth and moss and 40 years of forest growth, sat a Soviet rail car. Not a piece of one, not a rusted hull, an entire cargo car, the kind used for transporting freight across the steppes, Cyrillic lettering still visible on its corroded side. It sat there like a ship run aground, impossible, inexplicable, completely wrong. The nearest railroad tracks were 40 miles away. There was no road big enough to have transported it here. No evidence of how it had arrived, only the fact that it existed, that it sat rotting in the Montana wilderness, like a secret the earth had tried to swallow, and failed. Garrett walked around it slowly. The cargo door hung open, rusted hinges frozen. Inside, darkness, the smell of old metal and older secrets. He pulled out his flashlight, clicked it on, stepped inside. The beam cut through decades of dust and decay. Empty crates lined one wall, stenciled with Cyrillic characters. A workbench, tools scattered across it, papers yellowed and brittle, and on the far wall, photographs. 14 of them. 14 men in work clothes standing in front of mining equipment. Young men, most of them, smiling, alive. Beneath the photos, someone had written in faded ink, Project Coldwater, 1962 to 1965. Garrett's hands trembled as he picked up one of the papers. A manifest listing uranium ore shipments, dates, weights, destinations. All of it crossed out, stamped with a single word in Russian and English, classified. More papers, medical reports, radiation exposure readings, names of the 14 workers, each one marked with the same notation. Terminated, 1965. Not fired, terminated. Garrett's chest tightened. He knew that word, knew what it meant in the language of military operations and classified projects. Terminated didn't mean sent home. At the bottom of the stack, he found an envelope. Newer than the rest, the paper white, not yellowed. His name written on the front in handwriting he recognized instantly. Captain Nathaniel Cross. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside, a single letter dated 9 months ago. Garrett, if you're reading this, Stryker led you here. Good dog, good soldier. I didn't die in Helmand. The official report was wrong. I survived, came home, and I came here to finish what my grandfather started. His name was Samuel Cross. He's in that photograph, third from the left. He didn't quit in 1965. He didn't move on. He died here along with 13 other men, and they buried him twice. First in the ground, then in lies. I tried to expose it. I tried to make them answer. But the people protecting this secret have had 60 years to perfect the art of silence. They got to me before I could finish. Now it's your turn. I know you, Garrett. I know you blame yourself for Hellman. I know you think you failed me. But you didn't. I made my choice. I went in first because that's what leaders do. This is your chance to make a different choice. The land you bought, the cave you're living in, it's all part of this. They wanted to bury the evidence so deep no one would ever find it. But they didn't count on you. They didn't count on a man stubborn enough to live in a cave just to be left alone. They didn't count on Stryker, who won't let you walk past danger. The truth is in this railcar. The documents, the photos, the evidence. Don't let them bury these men again. Don't let my death be for nothing. You think you failed once. Here's your chance to succeed. Semper Fi, Nathaniel. Garrett read it 3 times. Each time the words hit harder. Cross wasn't dead, hadn't been dead, had been here in this place fighting this fight, and now he was gone, terminated. Garrett walked out of the rail car on legs that didn't feel steady. Stryker stood exactly where he'd left him waiting, patient, trusting. You knew, Garrett said quietly. Cross trained you, taught you to stop here, to wait for me. Stryker's tail wagged once, slow, deliberate. Garrett knelt, pressed his forehead against the dog's. He sent me here, left me a mission. Even dead, he won't let me quit. A sound made him look up. Someone was coming through the trees. Garrett moved quickly, positioning himself between Stryker and the approaching figure. A man emerged from the shadows, late 50s, dressed too well for a hike in the woods. Gray suit under a waxed canvas jacket. Clean hands, expensive watch. He smiled when he saw Garrett. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Thorne, I was hoping to run into you. Who are you, Garrett? From Victor Ashford. I'm a development consultant for Coldwater Ridge. I help the town navigate complex situations. He gestured around them. Like this one. I'm on my land. Of course, your land, legally purchased fair and square. Ashford's smile widened slightly. But I couldn't help noticing you've been exploring. Finding things, old things. Garrett said nothing. Let me be direct, Mr. Thorne. That land you bought, it has a complicated history, a history that some people believe should stay buried for the good of the community. 14 men died here. Did they, Ashford tilted his head, or did they move on, start new lives, leave this place behind? History is funny that way. So many versions of the truth. Stryker growled, low steady, the sound of a dog who'd identified a threat. Ashford glanced at him, then back at Garrett. Beautiful animal. German Shepherd. Yes, military working dog. Retired. Of course, like you. Ashford took a step closer. Mr. Thorne, I represent significant interests in this region. People who care deeply about Coldwater Ridge's future. People who understand that sometimes for a community to thrive, certain questions are better left unasked. And if I keep asking, then you'll find that living in a cave isolated, dependent on the goodwill of your neighbors for supplies for safety, can become very difficult. Accidents happen in the mountains. People get lost. Dogs get sick. It's a harsh environment for those without support. Garrett met his eyes, held them. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Ashford reached into his jacket. Stryker tensed, ready to spring. But Ashford pulled out only a business card, held it out. Think about it. Call me when you're ready to discuss a very generous offer for your property. We can make this simple, profitable, safe. He placed the card on a nearby rock, turned, walked away. Before he disappeared into the trees, he called back, Welcome to Coldwater Ridge, Mr. Thorne. I hope your stay is pleasant. Silence returned. Garrett picked up the card, looked at it, looked at Stryker. He just confirmed everything in that letter. Stryker's tail remained still. Garrett walked back to the rail car, Stryker following. Inside, he gathered the documents carefully, the photographs, the letter from Cross. Evidence, truth, the kind of truth that got people killed. As he worked, a memory surfaced. Helmand Province. Night raid. Cross moving ahead of the squad, checking corners, clearing rooms. Garrett had ordered him to wait to let the K9 team go first. Cross had looked back, smiled, said 4 words. Leaders go in first. Then he'd turned the corner. The IED had been there waiting, but Cross had triggered it alone, his body absorbing the blast that would have killed 4 more men. The official report said he'd died instantly. Garrett had believed it, had carried the guilt of that order for 3 years. Now he knew the truth. Cross had survived, had come home, had found another mission, another fight, and he'd left Garrett a roadmap, knowing that guilt and duty were the 2 forces Garrett couldn't resist. Clever bastard, Garrett whispered. Outside, the sun was dropping toward the mountains. Garrett secured the documents in his pack, took one last look around the rail car, then headed back toward the cave. Stryker led the way, but differently now. More alert, more deliberate, as if he understood that something had changed, that they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. At the cave entrance, Garrett stopped. Looked down at the valley below, at the small town settling into evening smoke rising from chimneys, lights flickering on in windows. Normal life. Simple life. The life he'd tried to build and failed. Cross's words echoed in his mind. Here's your chance to succeed. Stryker sat beside him, shoulder pressed against his leg. Solid, certain, present. Garrett placed a hand on the dog's head. Tomorrow we start asking questions. Tonight we rest. They went inside. Garrett lit the lantern, made dinner from an MRE, gave Stryker half. The dog ate slowly, efficiently, then settled onto his blanket. Garrett pulled out Cross's letter again, read it in the lantern light. Studied the photograph of the 14 workers. Memorized their faces. Somewhere in the valley below, Victor Ashford was making phone calls. Planning, calculating, protecting secrets that had lasted 60 years. But he didn't know Garrett Thorne. Didn't understand what 3 years of guilt could do to a man, how it could sharpen him, focus him, make him willing to walk into fire if it meant redemption. And he definitely didn't understand Stryker. Didn't know that this dog had been trained by one of the best operators in SEAL history, trained not just to follow orders, but to make decisions to protect his handler, even when that handler was too broken to protect himself. Garrett lay down, Stryker curling against his side. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow. Cross knew I'd come, Garrett said softly. Knew I'd buy this land. Knew you'd lead me to that rail car. He set this whole thing in motion before he died. Stryker's breathing deepened, steady calm. Question is, boy, are we smart enough to finish what he started? Or are we going to end up like those 14 workers, disappeared, forgotten, buried under lies? No answer. Just the wind and the darkness and the weight of a mission Garrett hadn't asked for but couldn't refuse. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring questions, confrontations, danger. Tonight there was only the cave, the cold, and a dog who'd followed him into hell once before and would do it again without hesitation. That would have to be enough. Morning broke cold and clear over Coldwater Ridge. Garrett stood at the cave entrance, watching frost glitter on the pines like broken glass. He'd slept poorly, dreams full of sand and blood, and Cross's voice saying the same thing over and over, leaders go in first. Stryker emerged from the cave, shook himself once, and moved to Garrett's side. The dog scanned the valley below with methodical patience, a sentry who never forgot his post. We need answers, Garrett said quietly. Need to know what really happened to those 14 men. Stryker looked up at him, one ear forward, one back, listening. Garrett gathered the documents from the rail car, secured them in a waterproof bag, and headed down the mountain. The truck's engine protested the cold, but eventually turned over. Stryker jumped into the passenger seat, sitting upright, alert, watching the road ahead like he was riding point on a convoy through hostile territory. The Coldwater Ridge Library was a small brick building next to the post office, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and furniture polish and quiet. A woman in her 70s looked up from the circulation desk as Garrett entered, her expression shifting from welcoming to cautious when she saw Stryker. Dogs aren't usually allowed, she began. He's a service animal, Garrett said. It wasn't entirely a lie. Stryker had kept him alive through more panic attacks than he could count. She nodded slowly. What can I help you find? Local history, mining operations, 1960s. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she gestured toward the back corner. Historical archives are that way. Most of it's on microfiche. You know how to use the machine. I'll figure it out. The archives were sparse. Coldwater Ridge wasn't big enough to generate much history worth recording, but Garrett found what he was looking for in a bound volume of local newspapers from 1965, June 12, 1965. Coldwater mining project concludes, workers relocate. The article was short, barely 3 paragraphs. It described the uranium mining operation as a successful venture that had employed local workers for 3 years. When the ore deposits proved less profitable than anticipated, the project closed. Workers were given severance and relocated to other mining operations in Nevada and Colorado. No names, no details, no mention of 14 men vanishing without a trace. Garrett flipped through more newspapers. July 1965, August, September, nothing. As if to mind the workers, the entire operation had been carefully erased from the public record. He was about to close the volume when a smaller article caught his eye. Bottom of page 4, September 18, 1965. Local woman seeks information on missing husband. Mrs. Eleanor Cross, wife of mining engineer Samuel Cross, has contacted authorities regarding her husband's whereabouts. Mrs. Cross states her husband did not relocate as previously reported and has not been in contact since June 1st. Sheriff's Department considers the matter closed pending new evidence. Eleanor Cross, Captain Nathaniel Cross's grandmother. Garrett photographed the article with his phone, then searched for more. He found two additional mentions, both brief, both stating that Mrs. Cross's inquiries had been investigated and found baseless. Then nothing. The story disappeared like smoke. Behind him, Stryker whined softly, low, barely audible. A warning. Garrett looked up. Through the library window, he saw Victor Ashford's car parked across the street. The man himself stood beside it, phone to his ear, her eyes fixed on the library entrance. Time to go, boy. They left through the back door, circled around to where Garrett had parked the truck. He drove north, away from town, toward the old mining road Owen had mentioned. If the official records had been sanitized, maybe the physical evidence hadn't been. The road was barely passable, overgrown with scrub pine and choked with fallen branches. Garrett drove until the truck couldn't go farther, then continued on foot. Stryker ranged ahead, nose to the ground, moving in the controlled pattern of a dog working scent. The forest here felt different, quieter, as if even the wildlife knew to avoid this place. They found the mine entrance after 20 minutes of hiking, or what was left of it. The shaft had collapsed decades ago, the opening sealed with a concrete cap stamped with faded warnings. Danger, do not enter, unstable ground. Garrett walked the perimeter. The concrete was old but professionally done. Not a hasty patch job. Someone had taken time, effort, expense to ensure this mine stayed closed. He pulled out his radiation detector, a small handheld unit he'd bought online after reading Cross's letter. The needle jumped immediately, clicking softly, not dangerously high, but elevated, consistent with uranium exposure even decades later. They died here, Garrett said more to himself than to Stryker. Radiation poisoning, and someone sealed the evidence underground. A voice behind him made him turn sharply, hand moving to his knife. I thought I might find you here. Owen Harlow stood 30 feet away, hands visible empty. He looked older in the harsh daylight, worn down by something more than age. You're trespassing, Owen said, but there was no anger in it, just resignation. So are you. Owen walked closer, stopped when Stryker's ears went flat. Easy, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because I saw your truck, because I knew where you were going. Your grandfather worked this mine. Yes. Owen's voice cracked slightly. Samuel Harlow, not Cross, my mother's father. She took her husband's name when she married, but she never forgot what happened to her father. Never stopped asking questions. Garrett pulled out his phone, showed Owen the newspaper article about Eleanor Cross. She wasn't the only one asking. Owen stared at the image for a long moment. Eleanor Cross died in 1972. Heart attack, they said. She was 48 years old. My grandmother died 6 months later. Same thing. Two healthy women, both dead within the year, both after spending years demanding answers about their missing husbands. You think someone killed them. I think convenient deaths stop being convenient when they keep happening to inconvenient people. Owen looked at the sealed mine shaft. My mother found letters in my grandmother's things. Letters to senators, to the Department of Energy, to newspapers. All of them got the same response. The matter has been investigated and resolved. The workers relocated voluntarily. No further action warranted. But she didn't believe it. No, and neither did Eleanor Cross. Owen met Garrett's eyes. My mother told me something before she died. She said Eleanor had a son, a boy who grew up hearing stories about his grandfather. A boy who became a Marine, then a SEAL. A boy who came back here 30 years later asking the same questions. Garrett's chest tightened. Nathaniel Cross. He came to see me 9 months ago, showed me documents, photographs, evidence he'd found in that Soviet railcar. Said his grandfather had been murdered, along with 13 other men, their bodies buried in this mine, and the whole thing covered up by people who had the power to make witnesses disappear. What did you tell him? I told him to be careful. Told him the people protecting this secret had killed before and would kill again. Owen's voice dropped. 3 weeks later, his car went off the road up on Widow's Peak. Single vehicle accident. No witnesses. Sheriff ruled it driver error. You don't believe that. I believe Nathaniel Cross was one of the best drivers I ever met. I believe his car had been serviced the day before. And I believe that stretch of road has a guardrail that looks like someone cut through it and then welded it back together. Stryker moved closer to Garrett, pressing against his leg. The dog sensed the tension, the danger that hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Why are you telling me this? Garrett asked. Because you're going to keep digging. I can see it in you. Same look Nathaniel had. Same stubborn refusal to let the dead stay buried. Owen glanced at Stryker. And because that dog won't let you quit. Cross-trained him, didn't he? Trained him to lead you here to this place, to this fight. Yes. Then you need to understand what you're up against. Victor Ashford isn't just a development consultant. He's the gatekeeper. His father was involved in the original cover-up, and when the old man died, Victor took over. Protecting the secret became the family business. He has resources, connections, people in positions of power who owe him favors. If you threaten to expose what happened here, he will come after you, and he won't stop until you're silent. Let him try. Owen shook his head. You don't understand. This isn't Afghanistan. You can't fight this enemy with weapons and tactics. They'll destroy you legally, financially, socially. They'll make you look crazy, paranoid, a damaged veteran seeing conspiracies where none exist. And when that doesn't work, they'll arrange an accident, just like they did with Cross. Then how do I fight them? You don't. You walk away. You sell the land back to Ashford, take his money, and disappear. You survive. Garrett looked at the sealed mine shaft at the concrete that had buried 14 men twice. Cross didn't walk away. And Cross is dead. Maybe, but he gave me a mission, left me evidence, a path forward. And I don't abandon missions. Owen studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You're going to get yourself killed. Probably, so. And you're okay with that? Garrett thought about Helmand Province, about the 3 people who died because of his orders, about the guilt that had followed him home, that had made civilian life impossible, that had driven him to a cave in the mountains just to find some peace. I've been dead for 3 years, he said quietly. Just took my body a while to figure it out. If I'm going out, might as well mean something. Stryker whined softly, bumped Garrett's hand with his nose. The dog's eyes held something that looked almost like understanding, almost like approval. Owen reached into his jacket, pulled out a folder. Nathaniel gave this to me the day before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to whoever came next. Guess that's you. Garrett opened the folder. Inside were more documents from the railcar, but also something else. A map hand-drawn showing the mine, the railcar, and a third location marked with an X. What's this burial site? Nathaniel found it using ground-penetrating radar he brought in quietly. 14 bodies, shallow graves, all showing signs of acute radiation poisoning. He was going to exhume them, prove they were murdered, but he ran out of time. Did he tell anyone else? Just me, and now you. Owen's expression hardened. Use it carefully. That evidence could bring on some very powerful people. It could also get you killed before you ever have a chance to make it public. A sound echoed across the valley, a car engine distant but approaching. Both men tensed. You need to leave, Owen said urgently. If Ashford finds us together, he'll know I'm helping you. What about you? I've got a son, 9 years old. I'm not a hero, Thorne. I can't fight this fight, but maybe you can. Owen disappeared into the woods, moving fast. Garrett and Stryker headed back toward the truck, taking a different route, staying off the main trail. They were halfway there when Stryker stopped. Completely stopped. The same way he'd stopped before finding the rail car. What is it, boy? Stryker's nose worked the air. His body went rigid. Then he barked sharp and urgent and took off running. Garrett followed branches, whipping his face boots, pounding the frozen ground. Stryker was fast disappearing into the underbrush, then reappearing, circling back, barking again. Leading, insisting. They broke into a small clearing. At the far edge, partially hidden by fallen logs and dead leaves, Garrett saw something that made his blood freeze. A child's backpack, small blue with dinosaur patches. Stryker pawed at it, whining. Garrett approached carefully, knelt, examined it. Fresh, not weathered. The zipper still worked. Inside, he found a school notebook with a name written in careful print on the cover, Eli Harlow. Owen's son. Garrett's radio crackled to life, though he didn't remember turning it on. A voice cut through the static, public broadcast emergency frequency. Attention all available personnel. 9-year-old Eli Harlow missing since 1400 hours. Last seen near the restricted forest area north of town. Search and rescue teams forming at the fire station. Repeat child missing, possibly in the woods near the old mining sector. Garrett looked at Stryker. The dog was already moving nose to the ground, following a scent trail only he could detect. Find him, boy. Stryker took off. Garrett followed, trusting the dog's instincts completely. They moved deeper into the forest, away from the mine, toward the area near the rail car. The scent trail led to a ravine, steep-sided and treacherous. Stryker descended without hesitation, picking his way down loose rocks and exposed roots. At the bottom, partially hidden by overgrowth, Garrett saw a dark opening. Another mine shaft, this one not on any map, not sealed with concrete. Just a hole in the ground, black and waiting. Stryker barked at the entrance, then looked back at Garrett. Urgent? Certain. Eli, Garrett called. Eli Harlow, can you hear me? Silence. Then faint, so faint he almost missed it, a voice. Help, please help. Garrett pulled out his flashlight, checked the radiation detector. The needle jumped higher than at the main mine. Dangerous levels. Not immediately lethal, but enough to cause serious harm with prolonged exposure. He looked at Stryker. Stay here, guard the entrance. The dog whined, unhappy, but obeyed. Garrett descended into the shaft. The walls were rough-cut, hand-hewn, the kind of desperate mining that happened when companies wanted ore fast and didn't care about safety. Support beams sagged at dangerous angles. The air smelled of rot and metal and something chemical he couldn't identify. 50 feet in, he found Eli. The boy was wedged in a collapsed section, rocks pinning his legs. His face was pale lips, blue eyes glassy with fear and shock. Blood seeped from a cut on his forehead. I got you, Garrett said, kneeling beside him. I got you, son. You're safe now. It hurts, Eli whispered. My legs hurt, and I'm cold. So cold. Garrett examined the situation. The rocks were heavy but movable. The problem was structural. If he shifted them wrong, the whole section could collapse. He pulled out his phone. No signal. Too deep. Eli, I need you to stay very still while I move these rocks. Can you do that? The boy nodded weakly. Garrett worked methodically, testing each rock before moving it, always aware of the creaking support beams above the radiation detector clicking steadily in his pocket. It took 15 minutes, but he finally freed the boy's legs. Eli cried out when Garrett lifted him. The left leg was broken bone visible through torn skin, but there was no time for splinting, no time for careful first aid. The radiation levels were climbing. They needed to get out. Garrett carried Eli toward the entrance, moving as fast as he dared. Behind them, something groaned, a support beam giving way. The shaft shuddered. Stryker, Garrett shouted. Back! Get back! The collapse started slowly, then accelerated. Rock and timber falling, the shaft closing like a throat swallowing. Garrett ran, Eli clutched against his chest, the boy's screams lost in the roar of falling stone. They burst into daylight just as the entrance imploded behind them. Dust and debris exploded outward. Garrett threw himself over Eli, shielding the boy with his body. When the dust settled, the mine shaft was gone, completely sealed. If Garrett had been 30 seconds slower, they would have been buried alive. Stryker was there immediately, licking Eli's face, whining softly. The boy reached up with a trembling hand, touched the dog's fur. Good dog, Eli whispered. Stryker's ears flicked once. Professional acknowledgement. Garrett radioed for help, then began treating Eli's injuries as best he could with his limited supplies. The boy was going into shock, his skin clammy, pulse rapid and weak. The radiation exposure was another concern, not immediately critical but serious. The rescue team arrived 20 minutes later. Paramedics, sheriffs, deputies, and Owen Harlow, who ran to his son with tears streaming down his face. Eli, oh God, Eli. Dad, the boy managed, the man and his dog. They saved me. Owen looked up at Garrett, his expression complex. Gratitude, guilt, fear all mixed together. Thank you. Thank you. They loaded Eli onto a stretcher, started an IV, wrapped him in thermal blankets. As they carried him toward the ambulance, one of the paramedics paused beside Garrett. The radiation exposure, you said the detector was showing dangerous levels. Yes, probably acute. He needs chelation therapy, full decontamination protocol. The paramedic's eyes widened slightly. You military was. Navy SEAL, I'm guessing. You've got the look. He glanced at Stryker. And the do. MWD. Retired. Good thing he was here. Kid wouldn't have lasted another hour in that shaft. The paramedic lowered his voice. But I gotta ask, what was a 9-year-old doing in a restricted area near abandoned mines? Kids explore, they don't understand danger. Maybe, or maybe someone told him something that made him curious. Someone told him there were secrets in those woods worth finding. The paramedic walked away before Garrett could respond. At the hospital, Owen found Garrett in the waiting room. Stryker lay at Garrett's feet, head on his paws, exhausted but alert. They're treating him now, Owen said, sitting down heavily. Broken leg lacerations, mild radiation poisoning. They say he'll recover fully, thanks to you. Thanks, Stryker. He's the one who found the backpack. Owen looked at the dog. Nathaniel trained him well. Yes, a long silence stretched between them. Finally, Owen spoke. Eli asked me yesterday about his great-grandfather. Asked if the stories were true, if Grandpa really disappeared, if someone killed him. I told him I didn't know. Told him it was old history, nothing for him to worry about. Owen's voice cracked. He went into those woods looking for answers. I was too scared to find myself. He's 9 years old. This isn't his fight. No, it's ours. Mine and yours. Owen met Garrett's eyes. I can't keep hiding from this. My son almost died today because of secrets my family has been too afraid to confront. That ends now. Whatever you need, whatever information I have, it's yours. Ashford will come after you. Let him. I'm tired of being afraid. Owen pulled out his phone, showed Garrett a series of photographs. I found these in my mother's belongings after she died. She kept them hidden, never showed them to anyone. I think she was afraid. But Eli's alive because of you, and I think she'd want you to have them. The photographs showed documents, mining permits signed by federal officials, contracts between the mining company and the Department of Defense, memos discussing the disposal of contaminated equipment, and in chilling bureaucratic language, the termination of exposed personnel. This is evidence of murder, Garrett said quietly. Yes, premeditated, carefully planned, officially sanctioned murder, and it goes all the way to Washington. Stryker lifted his head, ears pricking forward. A moment later, Garrett heard footsteps in the hallway, expensive shoes on tile. Victor Ashford entered the waiting room, his expression concerned, professional. Mr. Thorne, Mr. Harlow, I heard about Eli. Terrible accident. I'm so glad he's recovering. It wasn't an accident, Owen said, his voice hard. That mine should have been sealed decades ago. Instead, it was left open, dangerous, waiting for someone to fall in. The area is clearly marked as restricted. If the boy ignored the warnings, the boy is 9 years old. He doesn't understand that those warnings exist to protect secrets, not people. Ashford's expression tightened. I understand you're upset, Owen, but making wild accusations won't help anyone. Perhaps it would be better if you focused on your son's recovery rather than what? Rather than asking why a Soviet rail car full of evidence is sitting in the woods. Rather than questioning why 14 men died and were erased from history, rather than wondering why Nathaniel Cross's car just happened to go off the road 3 weeks after he started asking the same questions. The waiting room went silent. A nurse at the station pretended not to listen. A security guard shifted his weight uncomfortably. Ashford's mask slipped just for a second. When he spoke again, his voice was cold, stripped of its earlier warmth. Gentlemen, I strongly suggest you consider the consequences of the path you're walking. For your own safety. For your family's safety. Stryker stood, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The sound was quiet but unmistakable. A warning. Ashford glanced at the dog, then back at Garrett. That animal should be on a leash. He is, Garrett said quietly. It's just invisible. And it's a lot longer than you think. The two men stared at each other. Finally, Ashford turned and walked away, but his parting words hung in the air like smoke. Accidents happen in the mountains, Mr. Thorne. Even to careful men. Even to well-trained dogs. When he was gone, Owen had exhaled shakily. He just threatened us. Openly. In a hospital. He's scared. We're getting too close. Close to what? The truth. The kind that destroys reputations, ends careers, maybe puts people in prison. He's been protecting this secret for 30 years. He's not going to let it go without a fight. A doctor emerged from the treatment area. Mr. Harlow, your son is asking for you. Owen stood, then paused. You coming? Garrett hesitated. I'm not family. You saved his life. That makes you family. They found Eli in a recovery room, his leg elevated and casted IV, dripping antibiotics and chelating agents into his arm. His face was pale, but his eyes were bright alert. Mr. Thorne, he said weakly, is your dog okay? Garrett whistled softly. Stryker trotted into the room, went directly to the bed. Eli reached down, scratched the dog's ears. He's beautiful. What's his name? Stryker. Like a soldier. He was a soldier, so was I. Eli was quiet for a moment, then asked, did you know Captain Cross? The question hit Garrett like a punch. Yes, how do you know that name? I found his journal in the railcar. I wasn't supposed to be there, I know. But I heard Dad talking about Great-Grandpa Samuel, about how he disappeared. I wanted to find out what happened, so I followed the trail to the railcar, and I found Captain Cross's journal. He wrote about you, said you were the best SEAL he ever served with. Said if anything happened to him, you'd finish what he started. Owen looked stricken. Eli, you went into that railcar when... Last week. I'm sorry, Dad, I just wanted to know the truth. What else did the journal say? Garrett asked gently. That 14 men were murdered, that they were buried in the mine. that people in power covered it up because admitting the truth would be too expensive, too embarrassing. Captain Cross said someone needed to make them pay. Someone needed to give those men justice. Eli looked directly at Garrett. That's you, isn't it? You're the someone. Garrett didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, I'm going to try. Will they stop you, the bad people? They'll try. Then you need to be careful. Captain Cross wasn't careful enough. That's what his journal said. He trusted the wrong people who told them what he knew, and Eli's voice trembled. They hurt him because of it. Owen's face had gone pale. Eli, you can't talk about this. Do you understand these people are dangerous? I know, Dad. That's why Mr. Thorne needs to be smarter than Captain Cross was. He needs to not trust anyone. Eli looked at Stryker. Except his dog. Dogs don't lie. Dogs don't betray you. If Stryker trusts someone, Mr. Thorne can trust them too. Out of the mouths of children, Garrett thought, the wisdom that adults forgot. A nurse entered, clipboard in hand. I'm sorry, but the patient needs rest. You'll have to leave. Garrett stood. Eli grabbed his hand. Promise me you'll finish it. Promise me you'll make them pay for what they did to Great-Grandpa Samuel. I promise. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. Garrett and Stryker walked to the truck in silence. The day's events played through Garrett's mind on loop. Eli almost dying. The evidence Owen had provided. Ashford's open threats. And Cross's journal still in that rail car containing information even Cross had thought too dangerous to remove. We need to go back, Garrett said to Stryker. Tonight, before Ashford destroys whatever evidence is left. Stryker's ears pricked forward. Alert. Ready. They drove back to the cave as darkness fell. Garrett gathered supplies, checked his flashlight, strapped a fixed-blade knife to his belt. Stryker watched tail slowly wagging. The dog understood. They were going back into danger, and this time they might not come back out. Before leaving the cave, Garrett pulled out his satellite phone, the one piece of high-tech gear he'd kept from his SEAL days. He uploaded scans of the core documents to an encrypted server, created a dead man switch. If he didn't check in every 12 hours, the files would automatically send to multiple agencies. It wasn't perfect, but it was insurance. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness as they drove the old mining road. No other vehicles, no witnesses, just the forest and the secrets it held. At the rail car, Garrett worked quickly, photographing every document, every piece of evidence. Stryker stood guard at the entrance, ears rotating, catching sounds Garrett couldn't hear. He was almost finished when Stryker barked. Sharp, urgent, warning. Garrett looked up. Through the trees, he saw lights. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. Time to go, boy. They ran. Behind them, voices shouted. Flashlight beams swept the forest. But Garrett and Stryker were already gone, melting into the darkness like smoke, taking the evidence with them. Back at the cave, Garrett spread the documents across the floor. Photos, memos, contracts, testimonies. Everything Cross had gathered, everything Owen had provided, everything Eli had risked his life to find. The truth, complete, undeniable, damning. Now he just had to figure out how to expose it without getting killed in the process. Stryker lay down beside him, head on Garrett's leg. The dog's warmth, his solid presence, was the only thing keeping Garrett from feeling completely alone. Tomorrow, Garrett said quietly, we take the fight to them. No more hiding, no more running. We finish what Cross started. Stryker's tail thumped once against the cave floor. Agreement. Outside, the temperature dropped. Snow began to fall soft and silent, covering the mountain in white. Winter was coming, and with it a reckoning 60 years in the making. The snow came down harder than the Weather Service had predicted. What started as light flurries at dawn became a wall of white by mid-morning, the kind of storm that turned mountains into tombs and roads into death traps. Garrett stood at the cave entrance watching the world disappear. Stryker sat beside him, snow accumulating on his dark fur. The dog's breath came in steady clouds. His eyes tracked something Garrett couldn't see, some movement in the swirling white that only a working dog's senses could detect. What is it, boy? Stryker's ears rotated forward. A low whine built in his throat. Not fear, warning. Then Garrett heard it too. An engine struggling against the storm. Headlights appeared through the snow, dim and wavering, growing brighter as the vehicle climbed the trail toward the cave. Garrett's hand went to the knife on his belt. Behind me. Stryker moved, positioning himself between Garrett and the approaching vehicle. The truck lurched to a stop 20 yards from the cave. The driver's door opened. Owen Harlow stumbled out, snow immediately coating his jacket. Thorne, he shouted over the wind, we need to talk. Now. Garrett gestured him toward the cave. Owen ran head down against the driving snow. Inside, he shook himself, snow falling in clumps from his clothes. Ashford knows, Owen said, breath coming hard. He knows about the documents, about Eli finding the journal, about everything. How? Hospital security cameras. They caught Eli talking to you, caught him mentioning the journal. Ashford has people everywhere, Thorne, eyes and ears in places you wouldn't expect. Owen pulled out his phone, showed Garrett a text message. He sent this an hour ago. The message was simple, chilling in its brevity. Bring the documents to my office by noon, or the boy has another accident. This time no one finds him. Garrett's jaw tightened. He threatened Eli. He threatened my son, a 9-year-old boy in a hospital bed. Owen's voice shook. I want to kill him. I want to drive to his house and put a bullet in his head. That's what he wants. Give him an excuse to paint you as the dangerous one, the unstable veteran, the conspiracy theorist who turned violent. Then what do we do? Stryker moved to the cave entrance. He stood perfectly still, staring out into the storm. His posture had changed, no longer relaxed, every muscle coiled ready. Something's wrong, Garrett said. The radio on his belt crackled to life. Static, then a voice. The emergency broadcast system. Winter storm warning upgraded to blizzard conditions. All residents advised to shelter in place. Roads impassable. Emergency services suspended until conditions improve. Repeat, shelter in place. Do not attempt travel. Owen looked at the cave entrance, at the wall of white beyond. We're trapped up here. No, we're protected. There's a difference. Ashford won't wait out the storm. He'll come for the documents. Let him try. As if summoned by the words Stryker barked, once sharp, definitive. Then he was moving, disappearing into the storm before Garrett could stop him. Stryker, no! Garrett grabbed his jacket, pulled it on. Owen caught his arm. You can't go out there. You'll die in this weather. That dog doesn't run without reason. He stepped into the blizzard. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing breath, burning, exposed skin. Snow drove horizontally, visibility reduced to inches. Garrett could barely see his own hands. Stryker? A bark answered, muffled by the storm but directional. Garrett followed the sound, one hand stretched ahead, feeling his way through the white. His foot hit something soft. He knelt, brushed away snow. A person, face down, not moving. Garrett rolled them over. A woman mid-30s, lips blue, eyes closed. Her jacket was expensive but insufficient for this weather. City clothes. She wasn't prepared for a Montana blizzard. He felt for a pulse, weak but present. Strikers appeared beside him, snow-coating his face. The dog grabbed the woman's sleeve and his teeth began pulling. Helping. Together, they dragged her back to the cave. Owen helped pull her inside, started stripping off her frozen outer layers while Garrett built up the fire. Who is she? Owen asked. Garrett searched her pockets, found a phone dead from the cold, a wallet with a driver's license. Dr. Rebecca Ashton, Denver, Colorado. And a business card, Environmental Protection Agency, Criminal Investigations Division. Federal agent, Garrett said. The woman's eyes fluttered open. She tried to speak, coughed instead, her whole body shaking with cold. Garrett wrapped her in his sleeping bag, held a canteen of water to her lips. Small sips, you're hypothermic. Don't talk yet. She ignored him. Documents, she whispered. Nathaniel Cross. Where? Garrett exchanged a look with Owen. Who are you, EPA? Investigating Cross's death. He contacted us 2 months before he died. Said he had evidence of illegal uranium mining, radiation poisoning, corporate murder, are covered up by federal officials. She coughed again. We opened a case. Then he died. Car accident. Too convenient. So I came to finish his investigation. In the middle of a blizzard. Didn't expect the storm. Was at the rail car when the weather turned. Got disoriented. Your dog found me. She looked at Stryker, who sat nearby, snow melting in his fur. He wouldn't leave. Kept barking, pulling my sleeve. Saved my life. Stryker's ears flicked once. Professional acknowledgement. Rebecca tried to sit up, winced. My leg. I think it's broken. Owen examined it carefully. Fractured ankle. You must have fallen. Probably didn't even feel it with the cold. How long until the storm passes? She asked. Garrett looked at the cave entrance, at the solid wall of white. Hours. Maybe days. This is a bad one. Then we're stuck here. Together, Owen added, which means Ashford can't get to us, and we can't get the evidence to anyone who matters. Rebecca's expression hardened despite her pain. The evidence, you have it. Garrett nodded. Show me. He spread the documents across the cave floor. Photos of the 14 workers, mining permits, memos discussing disposal of contaminated personnel, medical reports showing fatal radiation exposure. In Cross's journal, water-stained but legible, documenting everything he'd discovered. Rebecca read in silence, her face growing harder with each page. Finally, she looked up. This is worse than Cross told us. This isn't just corporate negligence. This is premeditated murder, sanctioned at the federal level. Can you prosecute? Owen asked. If I can get this evidence to my superiors, yes. We can bring charges, but we need more than documents. We need bodies. The mine shaft where Eli was trapped, Garrett said. Cross's notes say there's a burial site. 14 bodies, all showing signs of acute radiation poisoning. GPS coordinates. In the journal. Rebecca tried to stand collapsed with a cry of pain. We need to get there, document the site, exhume the remains before Ashford destroys the evidence. Not in this storm, Garrett said. We wait until it passes. Ashford won't wait. The moment the road's clear, he'll come for these documents, and for anyone who's seen them. A sound outside made them all freeze. Stryker's ears shot forward, his lips pulled back, showing teeth. A growl built in his chest, deep and menacing. Garrett moved to the cave entrance. Through the driving snow, he saw lights. Multiple lights. Vehicles, plural, struggling up the trail despite the blizzard conditions. They're here, Owen whispered. Rebecca pulled herself to the cave wall, face pale with pain and fear. How many? Can't tell in this weather. At least 2 trucks. Ashford doesn't make threats he won't follow through on. If he said he'd come for the documents, he meant it. Storm or no storm. Stryker positioned himself at the cave entrance, body low, ready to attack or defend. His eyes never left the approaching lights. Garrett checked his knife, the only weapon he had. Owen, get Rebecca to the back of the cave. Stay with her. What are you going to do? What I'm trained for. The truck stopped outside. Doors opened. Voices carried on the wind, muffled but angry. Garrett counted 4 men, maybe 5, all armed with flashlights, probably other weapons too. One voice rose above the rest. Victor Ashford. Mr. Thorne, I know you're in there. I know you have the documents. I'm here to make a final offer. Garrett didn't respond. $500,000, cash, untraceable. You give me the documents, everyone walks away. You get to live quietly in your cave. Owen's son stays safe. The federal agent we know is with you, gets to close her case with a neat little accident report. Everyone wins. Rebecca made a sound of disgust. He's offering to buy off a federal investigation. He's done it before, Owen said bitterly. My grandmother, Eleanor Cross. How many others? Garrett stepped to the entrance, careful to stay in shadow. What happens to the 14 men buried in that mine? Do they just stay forgotten? Ashford's laugh was cold. They've been forgotten for 60 years. What's another 60, another 100? Dead men don't care about justice, Mr. Thorne. Living men do, living families, living children. Is that another threat against Eli? It's a reality. Accidents happen, especially to little boys who wander into dangerous places. But they don't have to happen, not if their fathers make smart choices. Owen started forward, rage on his face. Garrett stopped him with a hand. That's what he wants. He wants you to do something stupid. Ashford's voice came again. I'm going to count to 60. If you don't bring me those documents, we come in, and we won't be gentle. Not with you, not with the crippled federal agent, not with Owen. 1 minute, Mr. Thorne. Choose wisely. The counting began, slow, measured, each number like a hammer blow. Rebecca pulled herself forward. Give him the documents. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Garrett said. You said it yourself. This is our only evidence. Then we're dead. All of us. Maybe. Garrett looked at Stryker. The dog met his eyes, held them. In that gaze, Garrett saw something he'd seen before. In Helmand. In firefights, in ambushes, in moments when death was certain and survival impossible. He saw trust. Absolute, unwavering trust that Garrett would find a way. 30, Ashford called. 30 seconds, Mr. Thorne. Garrett knelt beside Stryker, placed both hands on the dog's face. Remember Helmand. Remember the compound with 3 exits and 20 hostiles. Stryker's tail moved. Once. Memory. Same play. You know what to do. The dog's eyes sharpened, understanding. 20 seconds. Garrett looked at Owen. When I say run, you take Rebecca and go deeper into the cave. There's a second exit, narrow, about 200 feet back. Cross mentioned it in his journal. It leads down to a ravine. You can hide there. What about you? Stryker and I are going to give you time to get clear. 10 seconds. Rebecca grabbed Garrett's arm. You can't fight 5 armed men with a knife. I don't have to fight them. I just have to make them wish they'd stayed home. 5, 4, 3. Garrett whistled low and sharp. A command striker knew from 100 missions. The dog shot out of the cave like a missile disappearing into the snow. Ashford stopped counting. What the hell was that? Then the screaming started. A man shouted in pain and fear. Something bit me. Jesus Christ, something bit me. More shouts. Flashlight beams swinging wildly. The crack of a gunshot, then another. But shooting at Stryker in a blizzard was like shooting at smoke. The dog was everywhere and nowhere a ghost, in the white attacking from angles they couldn't predict, disappearing before they could respond. Fall back, Ashford yelled. Back to the trucks. Garrett used the chaos to move. He slipped out of the cave on the opposite side from where Stryker was working, circled around through the storm. His knife was in his hand. His training took over muscle memory from years of night operations. He found the first man stumbling through the snow, bleeding from a bite wound on his arm. Garrett struck him from behind, not to kill, just to incapacitate. The man went down hard. The second was easier. Panicked, firing his weapon at shadows, completely unaware of Garrett until it was too late. He joined his companion in the snow. Where are they? Someone screamed. Where did they go? Stryker appeared beside Garrett, snow-covered eyes bright with the adrenaline of combat. Not playing, working, doing what he'd been trained to do. They moved as one unit the way they had in Afghanistan and Syria, in a dozen places where the night belonged to those who understood violence as a tool, not a passion. 2 more men went down. Then it was just Ashford standing beside his truck gun, drawn, spinning in circles. Show yourself, he yelled. Show yourself, you coward. Garrett stepped out of the storm, 10 feet away, close enough to see the fear in Ashford's eyes. You came to my home, Garrett said quietly. Threatened a 9-year-old boy. Threatened to kill a federal agent. All to protect a 60-year-old lie. Ashford raised his gun. Those documents don't leave this mountain. They're already uploaded to the cloud before you ever got here. Copies are sent to the EPA, the FBI, the Washington Post. You're done, Ashford. The secret's out. It was a bluff, but a good one. And Ashford believed it. Garrett could see the moment belief turn to desperation, see the finger tighten on the trigger. Stryker was faster. The dog hit Ashford from the side, 80 pounds of trained fury. The gun went off, the bullet going wide, but not wide enough. Stryker yelped once, sharp and pained, as the bullet grazed his shoulder. Blood darkened his fur, but the dog didn't let go. His teeth stayed locked on Ashford's wrist, training overriding pain. Garrett's heart stopped. Stryker, release. The dog obeyed, stumbled sideways, favoring his right front leg. Garrett kicked the weapon away, then dropped to his knees beside Stryker. The wound was shallow, a graze along the shoulder muscle. Painful but not critical. Blood soaked into the snow. You're okay, Garrett whispered, hands shaking as he examined the injury. You're okay, boy. Stryker leaned into him, tail wagging weakly. Ashford clutched his bleeding hand, face twisted with pain and rage. You have no idea what you've done. The people I work for, they won't let this stand. They'll come for you, for your dung, for everyone you've talked to. Let them come. You think you're a hero, you're a fool, a dead fool. Garrett zip-tied Ashford's hands with strips torn from the man's own jacket, left him in the snow. The other 4 men were already regaining consciousness, groaning, bleeding, defeated. Stay down, Garrett said to them. Storm will clear in a few hours. Then you can walk back to town. But if I see any of you near this cave again, Stryker won't be so gentle next time. The dog barked once, then whined softly. The adrenaline was wearing off, pain setting in. Back in the cave, Owen and Rebecca stared at him. You're alive, Rebecca said, disbelief clear in her voice. Barely. Garrett knelt beside Stryker, began cleaning the wound with bottled water. The bullet had torn through muscle, but missed bone and major blood vessels. Lucky. Did you really upload the documents? Rebecca asked. Yes. He pulled out his satellite phone, right before the confrontation. Insurance. Rebecca gave him a number, a name, her supervisor at the EPA Criminal Investigations Division. The call took 20 minutes. Garrett explained everything while Owen photographed each document, each page of Cross's journal, transmitting them through the satellite link. By the time they finished, the evidence was scattered across a dozen federal servers, accessible to hundreds of investigators. The secret was out. After 60 years, the truth couldn't be buried anymore. Garrett bandaged Stryker's wound with supplies from his first aid kit. The dog accepted the treatment stoically, only whining once when Garrett pulled the bandage tight. Good boy, Garrett whispered. You did good. When the storm finally broke 36 hours later, the mountain was transformed. Snow 3 feet deep in places. The world scrubbed clean, white silent. Garrett stood at the cave entrance, breathing air so cold it burned. Stryker sat beside him, the bandage on his shoulder visible beneath his fur. The dog limped slightly, but his eyes were bright alert. Still on guard. Federal vehicles began arriving by mid-morning. FBI, EPA, even a team from the Department of Justice. They swarmed the burial site, the railcar, the sealed mine, carefully documenting, photographing, exhuming. The first helicopter evacuated Rebecca. Hypothermia, broken ankle, mild frostbite on 3 fingers. The hospital in Billings treated her, casted her leg, gave her a wheelchair, and strict orders to rest. She ignored the orders. By the time the excavation teams arrived, she was already back on site, directing operations from her wheelchair, with the intensity of someone who'd waited her entire career for a case like this. 14 bodies, she told Garrett that afternoon, all exactly where Cross said they'd be, all showing signs of acute radiation poisoning. We've got dental records, DNA, everything we need to identify them and prove how they died. What about Ashford? In custody, singing like a bird. Giving up names, dates, the whole conspiracy. Turns out when people realize they're going down, they become very cooperative very quickly. She smiled grimly. We'll have indictments within a month, prosecutions within a year. This goes all the way to Washington, just like Cross suspected. Good. It wouldn't have happened without you, without that dog. Rebecca looked at Stryker, who sat with his bandaged shoulder held stiffly. He really did save all of us, didn't he? That's what he does. Owen approached Eli, balanced on crutches beside him. The boy's broken leg was healing well, the radiation exposure treated successfully. He looked healthier than he had in the hospital color, back in his face, eyes bright. Mr. Thorne, Eli said formally, I wanted to thank you for saving me, for finishing what Captain Cross started, for making sure Great-Grandpa Samuel got justice. You're the one who found the journal, Garrett said. You're the one who risked everything to uncover the truth. I just followed your lead. Eli smiled, then looked at Stryker. Can I pet him and ask him yourself? The boy held out his hand, let Stryker sniff it. The dog's tail wagged, slowly, once. Permission granted. Eli scratched behind Stryker's ears, careful to avoid the bandaged shoulder. Does it hurt? A little, but he's tough. He's a hero. Eli looked up at Garrett. You both are. Owen pulled Garrett aside. What will you do now? The cave, the land, will you stay? Garrett looked around, at the mountains, at the forest, at the cave that had become more home than anywhere else he'd lived since leaving the service. Yeah, he said quietly. I think we will. The town knows what you did, knows you saved Eli, exposed the truth, brought down Ashford. They're calling you a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who couldn't walk away from a mission. Maybe that's what a hero is. The veterinarian in town treated Stryker's wound properly. A flesh graze, nothing critical, but enough to require antibiotics and 2 weeks of limited activity. The dog accepted the limitation with stoic professionalism, though his eyes followed Garrett everywhere, unwilling to let his handler out of sight. Garrett never left his side during recovery, not once. 3 months later, on the first warm day of spring, Garrett stood in the town square of Coldwater Ridge. The entire town had gathered, maybe 200 people. A memorial had been erected, black granite carved with 14 names. Samuel Cross, Samuel Harlow, 12 others. Their families stood nearby, some crying, some smiling, all grateful that their loved ones were finally remembered. The ceremony was simple. A local pastor said a few words about justice and memory and the importance of truth. Then Eli Harlow, standing on his healed leg, read the names aloud. Each one clear, each one honored. When it was over, people approached Garrett, shook his hand, thanked him. Some apologized for the way they treated him when he first arrived, for mocking the veteran who chose to live in a cave. Maggie Brennan brought a package of bratwurst, premium ones this time from a specialty butcher. She knelt, offered one to Stryker. The dog sniffed it, considered, then slowly, deliberately accepted. The crowd laughed, applauded. After the ceremony, Garrett and Stryker returned to the cave. The injury had left a scar on the dog's shoulder, a thin line of white fur where the bullet had grazed. Stryker didn't seem to notice it. He moved with the same economical grace, the same professional focus. That evening, Garrett sat by the fire, Stryker curled beside him. He pulled out Cross's letter one final time. You think you failed once. Here's your chance to succeed. I did it, Garrett said aloud. I finished your mission. The men got justice. Ashford's going to prison. The truth came out. He paused, then added, I hope wherever you are, you know that. I hope you're at peace. The fire crackled. The wind whispered through the pines. And somewhere Garrett could almost hear Cross's voice saying the words he'd said so many times in life. Outstanding, Lieutenant. Mission accomplished. Stryker shifted closer, pressing against Garrett's side. The dog's warmth, his solid presence, was a reminder that he wasn't alone, had never been alone. Not since the day a broken veteran and a loyal K9 had found each other in the wreckage of war. They'd survived Afghanistan together. They'd survived Montana together. Whatever came next, they'd survive that too. Because some bonds couldn't be broken. Not by distance, not by time. Not by death itself. Garrett closed his eyes, felt the peace he had been searching for finally settling into his bones. Not the absence of pain, not the erasure of guilt, but the knowledge that he'd done something that mattered. That 14 forgotten men had been remembered. That a 9-year-old boy had learned the power of truth. That justice delayed for 60 years had finally arrived. The cave was dark except for the fire's glow. Outside, spring was transforming the mountain, melting snow, revealing green beneath. New growth, new life, new beginnings. Garrett pulled his sleeping bag close. Stryker curled beside him, the dog's steady breathing, a rhythm that matched his own. And for the first time in 3 years, Garrett Thorne slept without nightmares. They mocked the veteran for choosing a cave, but that winter taught them something they'd never forget. Sometimes the darkest place holds the last light. Sometimes the man everyone dismisses is the one who changes everything. And sometimes miracles don't come as thunder and lightning. Sometimes they come as a loyal dog who refuses to walk past danger. As a letter from the dead leading you exactly where you need to be. As the courage to stay when leaving would be easier. Maybe that's how God works most often. Not by changing the world all at once, but by placing faithful companions beside us and waiting to see if we honor what they know. In the years that followed, people would tell the story of the Navy SEAL and his K9, how they came to Coldwater Ridge seeking peace and found a mission instead, how they exposed a 60-year cover-up and brought justice to 14 forgotten men, how they proved that one person, one dog, one truth could stand against decades of lies. The story became legend. The legend became inspiration. And Garrett Thorne, who'd come to Montana to disappear, became the man who showed a town what it meant to stand for something, even when standing cost everything. He never left the cave, never wanted to. It was exactly where he belonged. And Stryker the K9, who'd saved him more times than he could count, stayed right beside him. Professional, loyal, faithful. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell us, when did you almost give up, but something made you stay? Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, faith, and the long road to redemption. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he guide you through your own blizzards and place faithful companions on your path, the kind who won't let you walk into darkness alone. Amen.